Hey everyone, it's Chris. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I wanted you to know before we air this or before you listen to it that this episode was recorded before the COVID-19 crisis really kind of went through the industry. It was kind of on the cusp of things, but it really wasn't as worldwide, and the shops were still open, Linda's included. And I was kind of thinking, do I put this episode out because it's not related? And that's kind of a struggle that I think a lot of us are having. Do we focus on anything else but COVID-19? But I really love this interview with Linda, and I really would hate to not air this. So I wanted to let you know up front, just if you're listening, it's definitely not considering what's happening now because it wasn't happening then. And I do really hope that you get a lot out of this. It's a great conversation. Linda is an amazing entrepreneur, and I think you're going to love her story. So with that said, let's get to the regular Founder Friday episode with Linda Thach. This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Linda Thach of Little Skips Coffee in Brooklyn, New York. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFiorio. I'm your host for the show, and I am so excited to have you here for another Founder Friday. This time talking with Linda Thach of Little Skips Coffee. Can't wait to share that with you. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the wonderful people over at Prima Coffee, over at prima-coffee.com. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers because they curate the best equipment from all over the world, and then they match it with the needs of their customers. So when we're talking about brewers, espresso machines, grinders, even under-counter refrigeration, they work with you to make sure that you're getting exactly what you need for your situation. And you know that not only are they in your corner, but you're getting the best equipment out there. And now when you go to the website, prima-coffee.com, you're going to see not only that amazing selection of equipment, but you're also going to find a lot of free resources to help you learn that equipment and learn coffee, pour overs, learn about cleaning grinders, learn about latte art. They really invest a lot in equipping you, not just with the equipment, but with the knowledge that you need to be successful in making great coffee. And that's why I love them so much. And that's why I would really recommend you go to prima-coffee.com for all of your commercial coffee equipment needs. Amazing people, great equipment, prima-coffee.com. This episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series is a line of plant-based performance beverages that are designed not just for the professional barista, but right alongside of professional baristas. They put a huge amount of importance on getting feedback from the professional community that's going to use their product. And so you know that the product is actually going to perform the way it says in the title, performance beverage. What does that mean? It means that no matter what you choose, be it the almond milk, oat, soy, hemp, rice, coconut, you can be assured that you're going to get a product that stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing latte art ready texture, and keeps the flavor balance of the final beverage on the coffee. All these things are really critical, and you want the best for your customers when they order plant-based beverages in your shop. To learn more, go to pacificfoods.com. Just follow the link in the show notes for the food service section of their website. Get the product in your store. Try it out for yourself. I think you and your customers are really going to be impressed with what the Barista Series can do to elevate the plant-based beverages in your shop. Okay, so today we get to talk with the owner and founder of Little Skips Coffee in Brooklyn, New York, Linda Thach. It's such a great time talking with her because this coffee shop is all about offering simply amazing coffee and food, and doing so in a setting that's accessible, and is a realization of Linda's passion for sharing food, sharing drink in community. Having come over to the U.S. as a Cambodian refugee. Food played a central role in her upbringing, and also having worked in the restaurant industry for a long time before opening Little Skips, those two things kind of converged to fuel what she wanted to accomplish with Little Skips. And so again, you get this accessible space that is fun, is artistic, it is communal, and I love all of those things in a coffee bar. And it's been 10 years now. Founded in 2010, it offered Bushwick residents in Brooklyn access to great coffee in their neighborhood for the first time. And from there, really took off. It became a favorite spot for that neighborhood. And that led to opening more locations and even opening a restaurant. But in the 10 years that Little Skips has been in operation, there are ups and downs, of course. And there are some significant challenges that needed to be overcome through that journey. And we're going to be talking about all of those things, from the founding of the business to overcoming the challenge of having to shut down one of the stores, the original store, and what Linda did to pivot and overcome that challenge, which is a super timely thing to talk about right now. And also, we get to talk a lot about self-care as an owner, which I don't think we talk enough about. And so I'm really glad that we focused in on that amongst the myriad of other great things, operationally, culturally, with the values of the company. This is one of those episodes that I think is really going to be encouraging. So let's get right to the interview. Here now is my conversation with the owner of Little Skips in Brooklyn, New York, Linda Thach. Linda, welcome to Keys to the Shop. I'm excited to finally get a chance to talk to you. I've heard a lot about your cafe, and I love the vibe that you've got and the story behind the cafe, so I'm excited to dive into that today. And I guess I want to know first, how did all this come about for you? This is, you've got quite a following and a very unique cafe. Tell me about the establishment of Little Skips and how you came to start a coffee shop.
Well, when I first moved to Bushwick, there was actually nothing in the neighborhood, and I was already in love with the restaurant industry and thought that maybe I could open a restaurant in the neighborhood since there was actually nowhere to go eat or hang out. So I looked into opening a restaurant and realized it was going to be way too much money than what I had. So the next step was a coffee shop. And I realized I could afford that. The espresso machine was a lot cheaper than building out an entire kitchen. So I interviewed different roasters and decided to go with counterculture. And they pretty much, held my hand through the entire opening process, which was great. And eventually I put myself through their training, their coffee training, and immediately fell in love with coffee. I didn't know anything about the industry. I only drank coffee, but I had no idea, everything that the business entailed and how diverse the coffee industry would be, actually. I just kind of thought coffee was coffee. So when I went to training with counterculture, like I said, I just fell in love and knew that this was going to be my life for a while.
And it's been over 10 years now, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you first started, what was the landscape of coffee like in Bushwick?
There was nothing.
So yeah, there was, but at that time, it seems like there was coffee around you in New York City. Just, it's interesting to note this. I don't know if a lot of people know this, and maybe they do, but the way that neighborhoods work is that they can be very isolated, even though they're really right next door to places where there's a lot happening. Is that the case?
Yes, definitely. I mean, Bushwick itself is kind of like its own little bubble. I mean, it was very desolate at the time. Nobody really lived out here. It was mostly artists and musicians because it was the cheaper area to live in. So it was still pretty rough, a very rough area to live in. when my father came to visit me, he was very upset that I was living in Bushwick because just because of the scene. There wasn't any restaurants around. There was no coffee shops for sure. There was one bar called Goodbye Blue Monday that doubled as a coffee shop with just the worst kind of diner coffee. But that was pretty much it. So it was definitely a risk, I think, at first. There were coffee shops in Manhattan that I would frequent, but there was definitely nothing around where I lived.
So you said you had been in the restaurant industry for a while as a server, and you kind of thought coffee was coffee at that time. What was that moment? I'm curious to know, like in the training, as you started to explore the diversity that coffee offered and different things you could do in the industry, different coffees in general. Was there one kind of definitive moment for you where that really clicked? Was it in training, or was it as you operated your coffee bar?
It was definitely in training. So when counterculture first started, they were in a tiny little room in Manhattan, I think on the third floor of this office building. And that's where everyone would go get trained. Right now it's like this beautiful ground floor training center that's all decked out, multiple rooms. Before it was really just one tiny room. But it was honestly my trainers that inspired the love of coffee in me, seeing how passionate they were about it and learning all of the different aspects of coffee from farming, to the technical part of just running a coffee shop and the machine, and then providing the customer service. Like they really kind of went through, the entire aspect of having a coffee shop in training. And it was really nice to see how passionate to be around people who are super passionate about coffee. When I didn't know anything about coffee and I was drinking it mindlessly. So to be around people who had so much knowledge about coffee, it really, inspired me to go deeper. My trainers were actually Katie Cargiulo and Aaron Meister.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just Meister, basically. I think they go by now, and Tommy Gallagher. But I will say those three kind of started me on my path in coffee.
Fantastic people for sure, and I'm super glad you had that experience. I remember that lab that they had on the third floor.
Yep.
I haven't been to the new palatial training lab that they've got now, but
it's beautiful.
When you went from that class where you had your eyes opened, your palate opened, also, and then you open your cafe. I'm interested in the details of this because for a lot of people, you start with, well, I'm going to go and open a coffee shop, and then you go to a class, you go to a school, you go to Coffee Fest, which, both you and I are going to be at this weekend as of this recording.
Mm-hmm.
And then you open your doors or you start build out, and it starts to become real. And it's harder than the ideal that really got you into it. Did you experience sort of a, I guess, atmospheric drag when you started your shop after you decided, I'm in love with coffee and this is such a great thing? Did it sort of kind of not come against that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, was it a lot harder than you expected? Yeah.
I mean, of course, it's always much harder. But for me at that time, I was very young and naive, and it was more fun and exciting than it was scary and difficult. So, like I said, when you're that young, I didn't have any fear. I was excited to do something on my own, to provide something for myself, and to, just to prove that I can make it here in New York on my own. And that was something that, of course, drives a lot of people. So for me, it was exciting in the very beginning, and of course, a lot of challenges did come up that made it very difficult. To the point where, many times I considered closing down the shop and just walking away from it all.
What were a few, or what were some of the more standout things that you had come against that made you potentially close the store?
Well, in the beginning, even though you have customers, we were the only coffee shop. So we did have a good base of customers, but without really understanding the entirety of how a business works, which is you need to make money, you have to charge properly, you have to price properly. There's cost margins that you have to watch, which I know now. But then I open the doors and I'm like, coffee, $2. I just made up a number. um,
Wow.
yeah, and so even though I was selling a lot of coffee and I had a lot of customers, I honestly wasn't making money. And that is it's a really hard reality to face when you're looking at your shop and it's full of people, but for some reason you're having a hard time paying bills. I couldn't pay myself for the first year, and or my partner, and it became very strenuous on our partnership as well, since we weren't making any money. So there was a lot. So yeah, it was a big learning experience.
So you mentioned a business partner. Tell me about that. Was it sort of both of y'all's dream to sort of open this coffee shop and go and to do it? Or in the beginning, you said you were maybe hoping to turn the coffee shop into a restaurant.
Right.
How did this partnership come about?
It was mainly financial. So I started on my own. I had the idea, and I think about it was like a month before I was planning to open the doors, I completely ran out of money. I mean, nothing in my bank account. All of my credit cards were maxed out. The money I borrowed from my family was all gone. So that was really scary and sad, because I thought I put all of this time and effort, about 6 months into building out everything I had saved up, maxed out all my credit cards, and I can't open. So I had a friend, and she said, "Well, my boyfriend is looking to invest in a coffee shop and wanted to, have something in the neighborhood as well, because they also lived in the neighborhood." And so we met, and he decided, yeah, let's do this. I'd actually like to be a working partner. And he invested some money and became a working partner. And that's how I actually got my first partner. So it wasn't really planned. It's just kind of out of necessity for money.
Wow. And that's really cool, though, that somebody was around to help you. And it's not an easy business to get into, let alone um, in New York City. Maybe at the time in Bushwick it was, available to you because nobody else was doing it. But to be in that position, to run out of money and think your dream is going to fold, and then have somebody say, "Hey, I'll bring you the rest of the way," is just amazing. That's great. So this now becomes an issue over how many years, where you start to realize, hey, we got to think about cost of goods. We got to think about pricing strategies, or strategies in general. How long did you go before you were like, wait a second, let's right the ship a little bit?
It was probably, I think the first couple years were just trying to figure out the operational part of it. So first 2 years it was more, being on the floor, continuing to work on our customer service, building our business, getting people in the doors. And I think after the first 2 years, we're kind of still in the hard spot. And I think, my partner took care of the financial aspect of the business more. So it was something that, I was like, okay, why aren't we making any money? And, you can't really, even if it's a partnership, I think it's important for both owners, or however many, to be involved in the financial aspect of the business. So initially, when we went into it, I was going to be, the customer service side, the hospitality side, and he would be the finance side, but really to be successful, you have to educate yourself on every aspect of the business. So I really think after 2 years, we kind of buckled down and decided that we need to, raise prices, look at costs, find cheaper alternatives for what we were doing. And so that began the process.
Why is that important? Because on paper, it seems like a good plan to say, hey, there's these buckets that make up a business, and you're specialized in this area. Or if you want to use the word strength, your strength is in this area, and my strength is in this area, and it should work on paper. I mean, how does that break down in reality when this is not just something that happens with partnerships? It's also when, couples start a business, they say, well, you're better with people, so
Yeah.
you deal with hiring, and I'm better with tech, so I'll do that.
I mean, I think that it is good to have specific focus for if you're better at something. I do think that you should focus on that, but I now know for sure that you shouldn't be naive to all the other aspects of running a business. Um, it is important if you don't look at your finances, if you don't have control over that, you're not going to be successful no matter how good of a barista you are or how good of a chef you are. If you're not in tune with your finances and your cash flow, I think the business will, it can't survive. Yeah.
So then you obviously survived. I mean, over 10 years of being in business. And when you decided to create a change in the way that you conducted your business with pricing and sourcing, and did any of the experiential aspects of the business take a hit or need to adjust? Like, did customers feel that?
No, no. I think that it was more of on my end. It was I decided that I needed to educate myself more. So I read a lot of books. So I ended up, just reading a lot of business books. I would go to a lot of workshops and seminars on finance and how to use QuickBooks, and I utilized the workshops of the Small Business Administration. They would provide free workshops in New York. I would go to those and just make sure I was learning everything I could about the financial side of running a business. And it was very helpful. And I got really excited about that part because it's something that I wasn't good at. And I thought, if I'm not good at this, then I need to be better at it. And I think the challenge was exciting for me. And I think that's is why I'm doing, I was able to stay in business and be successful because I decided that I can't just focus on customer service and food and coffee. There's so much more behind that. And then over the years, there was more layers beyond just the finance that I realized was important to be working on in the business.
That's really interesting because then you're facilitating the ability to focus on customer service far into the future by, well, I don't want to say not focusing on customer service, but doing the things that, like you say, under the surface, the various layers underneath what makes customer service possible every day is really where your attention started to become paramount. And obviously the people that frequent your shop now are thankful that you did that, because there's a lot of owners who really just want to be baristas, but owners on, they want to be the person every day. And some can pull it off, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't really what you fell in love with that you need to start getting versed in. Was it a little bit frustrating I know you said it was exciting, but when you think back to counterculture training and then 2 years later thinking, well, now we need to start focusing on numbers and spreadsheets and strategies, did that kind of fly in the face of your passion for coffee a little bit? Did you need to reconcile it?
No, not at all. Like I
Okay.
said, it's you have to, knowing that that was an important part of my business, you have to make yourself excited about all the aspects of the business, because even if you hate a certain thing, like if you hate something, that energy is there and it's going to be there. So you have to actually find a way to make it enjoyable and know that the education, even if it's you're learning about something that you don't like, it's going to only make the business better. And for me, that was exciting. And honestly, I do have a finance background. I went to school for finance and economics, but over time, I realized that's not the world I wanted to be in. I didn't want to sit in an office and be behind a computer. So I became a waitress full time. And yeah, it's just kind of funny how things do loop back around. And I'm glad that I have, a degree, like a foundation in finance, because it has helped me when I return to taking the classes and, reading the business books. I realized, oh, okay, this is stuff that needs to be reinforced, but I did already have like a foundation in it.
Perfect. Man, what a testimony to the fact that you need to be a business person and not just passionate about coffee in order to really make it in this business. So I hope all of you listeners out there are taking notes if you're in that stage of opening or wanting to open your own coffee shop because you love the idea of coffee and it's so cool and awesome. It still will be, but geez, what a good testimony to what you need to
Yeah,
focus
it's
on.
it's still a business and you still have to make money in order to keep your doors open. So,
So, talk to me a little bit about the experience that you want your customers to feel. Like all of this work behind the scenes to put something together that is unique to yourself and your vision for coffee service. What is Little Skip's like vision and mission and all of that good stuff, the experience that you want people to have there?
I mean, really, it's, I love making people happy. I love um, entertaining, via good food and good drink. And I think that that's, growing up in an Asian household, everything revolves around food. So I think food is very important in my culture. So it's important for me to provide a space that you know experiences revolved around good food and good coffee.
Excellent. So, what you put together in your space just has to tick that box for you. So it's sort of like, in order to know that you've put that together well, does it really just need to make you happy to see what you're doing?
Yeah, for I mean that's always number one. You have to. It's all your energy. It does come. They say it comes from the top down. It comes from the owner, and it really does. Like you have to wake up in the morning and be excited to go into work. You have to be excited to, you know, talk to customers and meet with your staff. And all of that's going to come out in the way the coffee shop is presented to the world. So I work a lot personally on myself and making sure that I am constantly inspiring myself and motivating myself so that that energy it radiates when I step into work.
Wow, that's great. That's really good. Self care is one of those areas in, I guess, if you call it self care, it's self, progress and personal maintenance and all those terms. But sometimes people can just push that off to the side and think that's a little woo woo or that's, not working hard for your business. But, as we've had people on the show here before and I've said on the show, it's like you can't really do your best work unless you're at your best personally because so much of the business depends on you and the energy, like you say, the energy that you give off,
Yeah.
like your staff are going to pick that up and so are your customers.
No, it's directly connected. And after so many years, I realize like when I'm down, when I'm not doing well, I can tell like the business suffers. My staff, feels it. My customers feel it. Like it's like it radiates. And so it's so important to constantly be working on your own energy. So that way it's like you can't always be happy all the time, but you do have to realize that. I mean, I realize that so many people are dependent on what I'm putting out. So if I'm going to put out something negative or something bad, like, I'm not going to continue to have customers or staff stick with me. So I need to make sure I'm working on myself. I need to make sure I'm caring for myself. And sometimes that is saying, I need to leave the shop for a week to go on a retreat or do something. I have other business owners say, how do you leave your shop for sometimes, a week to a month? Like, I went on to yoga teacher training for a month last year, and they said, how do you leave your shop for a month? And I said, you just have to. Like, you have to trust that they will take care of it, that, you have good staff and good people around you. You really have to put trust into other people to allow yourself to be taken care of as well. And you have to take care of yourself. So
it also allows your staff to be able to grow. I mean, if you're constantly the one to just make everything happen, the fact that you can go away for a period of time and have your shop still be there, first of all, and I'm sure the first time you did this, it was a little scary because you had just spent so much of your person in this space. But then coming back and be like, oh, this is still here. And and so am I.
And honestly, I've actually found every time I leave, because when I first started, I let my partner know that I go to Cambodia for a month every year. So that's something that I'm not going to give up. And he was okay with that. But honestly, every time, and I still leave for a month, like every year, most times. Every time I come back, they find a way to fill in the gaps, right? So when you remove yourself, all of your staff and everyone around you has to fill in the void. And they do such a good job of that. When I come back, I'm always surprised and amazed by like how well things are running and these new ideas that they came up with without me being there. And it's actually, it's really heartwarming and exciting. I look forward to going away because I know that, I have complete trust in my staff and complete faith that, I'm giving them the opportunity to just kind of to rise up and to take care of the space as they would, want to see it.
What kind of systems do you have in place now over all these years that will help create sort of the consistency of your experience for the customer and does allow you to be able to go away? Because on one side, we were just talking about how if you're in a bad space, then it affects a lot of things. And I think one of the questions people might have is, well, if I'm systematizing things and I'm making the business not dependent on me, then I guess my energy wouldn't matter as much, which I still think it does, but you have to have some kind of way to facilitate success for your staff in that when you're gone, there are things that need to be done and there's rules and systems. Describe some of those for me and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. It's exactly what I say to everyone. I'm not just opening a coffee shop. I really am creating systems. And once you realize that, so initially when I started, yes, it was hard, and I was just running a coffee shop. At this point in my life, I think that I am creating systems to build and a bigger vision of what I want. So, there are a lot of systems at Little Skips, and I think that's something that if you are going to want to open a coffee shop or any type of business, you have to think first and foremost, how to create good systems, because you don't want to be burnt out. I create systems to allow me to live the life that I want to live. The business is for me to actually enjoy my life and not to be a slave to the business. But, just from, the first thing, onboarding, I have a specific, onboarding process. an orientation process that I do, one-on-one, face-to-face with every new employee that comes on. So I make sure there's always FaceTime. I also spend time every week at each location, and I give my managers one-on-one time. So each manager that I have gets 1 hour at least, one-on-one time with me every single week, and we work on things not just professionally, about the business. We also work on a lot of personal aspects of themselves. How can they improve themselves personally? How can they? I always ask, what can I do to help you achieve your goals? And let's talk about that. Um, Leadership training is something that I like to say I provide for all of them. So whenever they, like yesterday, I spent over an hour walking through my new head barista on how to trail someone, what to look for in a candidate who's going to come on to work for us, what we embody and what we're about. So a lot of that takes face time. So it is a lot of energy for me, which is why I need to spend a lot of time recovering and renewing myself outside of work.
I love that you have that consistent FaceTime with your staff and that you visit the locations as often as you do. And so many places that have multiple locations, there's the one that gets all the attention and then the other that just sort of is the pirate ship. And
Yeah.
it's got its own culture that's sprung up out of necessity or lack of attention from management and leadership.
Yeah, and that usually happens when you open a new location, and I've been there as well. When I open a new location, my former locations suffer. Now I recognize that. So even if I'm opening a new location, I still which I am now. We're opening Saturday.
Oh, great.
Yeah, but I still, like this week, had to make sure that I was present at the other two locations, even though I know that I'm going to be opening a new location Saturday and devoting a lot of time to that. I decided to make sure that my time, I still have FaceTime and I'm still present in the other locations so that they know I'm there and I'm still there to support them and that, you know.
When we talk about your story and we think about like the decisions that you've made for what you want your experience to be like for your guests and what kind of legacy you want to leave, I wonder how much of your story in coming into America as a refugee and kind of being a woman and a minority as a business owner, how does this all play into the kind of experience that you've had in trying to create these experiences for others? Like how much of your past really informs what you do with your business?
I mean, all of it, I really, it's the reason I push so hard, coming from, a country with nothing, basically escaping as a refugee, coming to America to pursue the dream. That's always in me. I think about it every single day, like how I used to have nothing and how much we've suffered. And with what I'm doing now, I really set out to make sure that everyone, all humans everywhere, everyone, I want to make sure that they feel accepted and valued and loved. Being a immigrant in this country as a child, it was really hard. Growing up, getting made fun of, not having money, not speaking English, all of that is something that is, it's a part of me, and I'm no longer angry or mad about it. I use that to really propel myself, to inspire others, to show them that you can change your life, you can make a difference, you can affect change in others by just pushing for a better life. And it's a part of everything that I do. It is what drives me. I do what I do, and I push as hard as I do because I don't want anyone to ever feel the way I felt when I first came to this country. Very, very alienated.
Well,
So
you're
with all of
sort
my shops, I really try to be welcoming and to make people feel accepted and included, and connected to each other and to the community and the space.
Is there an aspect of the reason why you chose to be, even though you've got that economic background, you chose restaurants and you chose a coffee bar? Is it connected to the role food played in your family? As I imagine, with a lot of the hardship that surrounded you, at least you had that. And was that sort of a central thing that was like that good feeling that you could count on, and now is something that you're perpetuating in your business?
Yeah, for sure. It was always, I was always happiest around food and around, dinner time and when we had people over and we had, cooking in the kitchen with my mom. Like those were the best memories for me growing up. And I still love cooking. I love just cooking for others makes me feel good. So I enjoy sharing my culture via food still.
Now, do you do food at Little Skips?
We do, yes. It's sandwiches and salads, so it's definitely not of my background, which is now I do have a Southeast Asian restaurant called Little Mo, and that's where I get to do the food that I grew up on.
Well, that's interesting. So, when did that happen? How soon into Little Skip's history did Little Mo come about? It seems like that's sort of a full circle back to your original idea that
Right,
I'm
it
going to start
is.
a restaurant.
That's what it was. Finally, the dream came true, and that's something I still to this day I'm like, this is, even though you have an idea and it may not be what happens initially and right away, you just have to keep working hard and trust. 4 years later, I was able to open Little Mo alongside Baby Skips, which is the second coffee shop, simultaneously. Two different projects, two different partners, but somehow I was able to do it. And it was a dream come true. Even though I wanted to initially open a restaurant, sometimes you have to wait. That's not what I was supposed to do at the time, and by putting the restaurant on the back burner, I was able to find this love for coffee, which is what I'm known for now, which is what I've built my reputation on is coffee.
Do you feel like you would have been successful if you had started Little Mo instead of Little Skips?
I do because it's me. I think I would have just, done everything I could to make it amazing, but it's just not the way it went. I don't think about what could have happened or what should have been. That's the way it happened. And it's because I was supposed to be in coffee. And now, like I said, it is a love of mine and I'll always be in this industry. And it's something that, I know is just was waiting to be a part of my life. Um, yeah.
Talk about milestones a little bit. And what I mean by that is, as you operated Little Skips and it grew and you systematized and you added staff and everything that goes along with operating a coffee bar over the years, when did it click and what were some milestones that let you know, hey, I don't have to be as like this has got a lot of momentum on its own, and I don't have to be as fearful, I would say, maybe that's not a great word, but of if I let my hand off the wheel, it's going to crash. It's now a stable business, and it shows the maturity of the brand.
It was started pretty early, honestly. Like we started in just a year or two into it. We basically just had lines out the door, like in our second year, and I knew then, and that's why I worked to open the second location. It was because I couldn't handle the amount of customers that were coming into our original location. Uh, so it was pretty early on in the business. I knew that there was something there, and honestly, it was because I enjoyed coming into work. I remember just having so many laughs with my customers and with my staff, and it just was a really fun atmosphere to be in. And when you work, quote unquote, in that way, there's no way you can't be successful.
Well said. As an aside, I've realized this in this whole conversation so far, we haven't even learned why the name Little Skips. What's behind that?
I know this is quite a story. It's a longer story than I'll tell you, but I mean, it really, it the idea of Little Skips. We started off before the cafe. I lived in an apartment down the street on Ditmars, and it was an apartment with all my friends. And we called it the Little Skips Party House. So we actually threw parties. We had live music and shows there. I got Dave Bazan to come play a house show in my apartment, and that
Wow.
was like a highlight. And so it stemmed from that. And so when I opened my coffee shop, I remember my roommate saying, "What are you going to call it?" And I said, "Duh, Little Skips." And the idea behind Little Skips is taking little skips through life. And I say, don't run, don't walk, just skip.
Mm, love it. That now I know I can rest easy. That's
Yeah, I know. It's silly. I was such a fairy back then.
well. I think that the expansion of your business proved to be fortuitous because at a certain point something happened where you had to leave your original location, which I can't imagine having to navigate this, having put as much as you did into it.
Mhm.
Talk about how you were forced out of your original location. What happened in that situation, and how did you navigate this?
Well, my lease was coming up. It's, 8 years now, and I knew in 2 years the lease would be up. I started trying to negotiate with the landlord to see if we can maintain uh, our rent or not have such a huge increase. So for about 2 years before the end of the lease, we were back and forth, and he wasn't budging. He wanted to pretty much, it was almost double the rent.
Hmm.
And, he says, "I just want market value." And I said, "I get it, but I've been here 10 years. I've created a community around the space. I've increased your property value. And I'm just, I still am only selling coffee, and it's not like I make a lot of money. I'm not a bar. Um, it will be a big hit to me if the rent doubles." But after the 10 years and the lease was up, nothing has changed. He's still holding out for what he wants, and that's totally fine with me. I thought that for a couple years, I gave it a good go. I did all I could to try to negotiate with the landlord and convince him that it would be a good idea to keep my rent at least with a minimal increase. But that the thing is, it wasn't meant to be. The 10 years was exactly what Little Skips was supposed to be. And I honestly don't feel bad about it. I do feel like whatever happens is just the way life goes. And it really opened up space for me to do other things. I got to breathe a little bit. I got to think about the future. I got to take some time off, like I said, and go to Ecuador to train to be a yoga teacher. um, and that's kind of put me in a different trajectory as well in my life. So yeah, and then it's only been, see, I think we closed the end of August, and it's March now, and I'm opening another location, and I didn't that was not in the plans either. So
You had the other location while this was happening, correct?
Yes. So when we closed the original location on Willoughby, I still had Baby Skips, which is about a block and a half away, and I also still had Little Skips East, which is also still in Bushwick,
Okay, and you had the restaurant too.
and the restaurant.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, great. And so it must have been emotional for others, though. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't emotional for you, but you have this, you've said it several times, and you've mentioned basically that's the way it goes. It wasn't meant to be, which is a unique way of viewing things as a business owner. And I'd be interested to know how you develop that mentality amidst, what has to be a pretty, you know, a lot of pressure to not have that mentality. There's a lot of reasons to sort of chuck that and start really worrying and regretting and things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, let's start there. Like, how did that mentality sort of get started in you?
Well, I say that the business is a blessing, and it's made me who I am. There was a lot of self discipline that needed to be cultivated throughout the years to run your own business and to be an entrepreneur. There's no one telling me what to do, there's no one above me. So if I am not disciplining myself and pushing myself and motivating myself, there's no one there to do it. And that's something that was like, it's really hard. It can be very lonely sometimes because besides having to motivate and push myself, there's a number of staff that I have to do the same for. And over time, when I realized that, you got to just let things go and you have to allow things to be, and you have to trust that if your intentions are good, then the universe will take care of you. And you can't worry. If I spend my time worrying about the past or what hasn't happened yet, then I'm not able to be present. So for me, through my practice, meditation and yoga, it's helped me to become more present and more aware of just what's happening right now. And that's really helped me to not worry about, something that I have no control over, that may happen in the future. So as we close, I just said, we're closing. This is what it is, and something else will be able to develop in a space that I've now cultivated from being able to close my original location.
How do you balance this? And I don't think that what you're describing is the antithesis of this, but how do you balance that with learning lessons through the past? So, because as you talk about that, I think maybe somebody might have the idea, well, that's the past. I'm not going to focus on it. I'm just going to focus on the future, which means potentially shutting off learning lessons or through mistakes that I've made in the past. And in order to learn my lesson, I might have to dwell on that. And if I dwell on that, I worry that I'm going to worry, or I'm going to
Yeah,
regret.
no, it is. That is the secret, and that is the practice. So the past is such an important teacher, and you have to be able to give yourself time for reflection. So after I closed, honestly, I had to take some time away, um, go, be away from this area. I went upstate, and I that's what I did. I reflected. I wrote a lot, and you have to think about all the things that you've learned, but also count all the good things that's come out of, the things that were difficult. So don't put the hard things aside. Don't cover them up. You do have to sit and look at, wow, that was really hard. That
Mm.
was a long ride. It was really difficult. There was so many people involved. There was so many tears. There was so much. And what can I sit with now and just accept that that's happened, and then take that. How can I use that to propel myself to make better decisions in the future? So I think every single day as a business owner, you have to give yourself reflection time. If you skip a day, I feel like that day was lost, and everything that happened, just happened. And again, you've taken yourself out of the present moment. You haven't been able to reflect on what went right, what went wrong. Reflection isn't like ruminating, right? You reflect, but it's again, it's a practice, but you have to try not to spiral into that hole, which a lot of people can, and I have before, but I know I don't like being there. And so that's something I push to try to make sure that I'm looking at something from like an outside perspective, and don't let myself go, down the wormhole into negativity, even though an experience may have been difficult or bad. It's always a learning experience for the future.
And that seems like that connects to how you've viewed your past, starting with nothing, and then that happened and you can't change
Right.
it. And now this has happened, you can't change it. And you're still here. And so are your staff and your
Yeah.
customers. And you're opening another location in 2 days from this
Yes.
interview, which is really awesome. So it's really cool to see that come full circle in sort of that the way that you've cultivated that mentality. And I'm glad that you've described the difference between reflection and rumination, because I always think like rumination actually rhymes with ruination.
That is true.
And so, and
And we all do it, we do,
Mhm.
but
Absolutely, it is a challenge. So when we're talking now about how things are currently, and you're opening this new store, I want to know a little bit about what you've experienced through all of these years. How has all this reflection and these lessons learned, and how has that been funneled into this new space? Is this a reflection of some of these lessons that you've learned?
all of them.
Mm.
I think from the first location and then building the second location, I took, it's always that process. You just take what you've learned, you move it into the next. And now I've been able to do that a few times. And I do think that with each shop that I open, it is a little more streamlined. It is a little bit better. The workflow, becomes a little bit better as well. So I put a lot of thought into design and layout and workflow with each location, because the first one was terrible. And we were the busiest location. There was lines out the door, but oh my God, I had no idea what I was doing. And, there was no space to move. You're back there behind the bar with like two, three other people, and then you only had like a foot and a half to maneuver. And now, I've created spaces. I think a lot about the barista, and I think a lot about the people who work there. How can I create a space to make it easy and stress free for them behind the counter? Because if they're enjoying the space and they're happy with it, then they're going to be able to provide a lot better customer service to our customers if they're happy. Yeah, and I still work at all my locations. So it's definitely something I think is really important, because being able to work behind the bar, you can see everything. You see what doesn't work, and you can make changes, and you can talk to them and say, hey, I worked here last weekend and I noticed that this is kind of it's a little annoying. What do you think about it? And they say, yeah, we've been having issues. And so that's good for me to be on the ground level, because then I can work towards like making the process a little bit better. And it's always an ongoing thing. Like, even though you're built out, even though you've been established now, like at Baby for 5 years, it's still something that I have to constantly work on and always try to make better.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of people feel as though store one is just like the legacy store, and almost don't
Hmm.
want to change anything, even though it's really every shop has a dysfunctional element in it, because we're not
Hmm.
perfect people. So, but people hesitate to want to change it because everyone's adapted to the dysfunction of the bar. So it feels like, oh,
Yeah.
well, we're fine.
Yeah, it's true. But every location you cannot replicate the original. And I already accepted that fact when I opened the second location. So I'm never trying to do the same thing as I did the time before. You have to like create a space and say, okay, this is a space. There's new people. This is a new neighborhood. There's new staff. You have to allow that energy to create the space and not try to like mold it into something that once was, because it never will be the same. Everyone, and everyone that all my customers, they still say the original location, they still talk about it. So you would, not do yourself a service trying to replicate that same feeling, because I know that I can't.
Mm. And in a way, I always respect, to draw an analogy, I always respect the shows, like really good TV shows that just stop at the right point and don't just keep
Yeah.
going. you know, so
Yeah,
if
I
it
know what you're
lives on
talking
in their
about.
memory for forever as this perfect place, awesome.
Right. It was a magical place. And, I still think that, and that's what I used to say when I started it, what are you doing? And I said, we're just creating magic.
Mm.
And I still do believe that for the other shops, but it's going to have its own magic. And if you are clinging on to something that you initially had in the past, you're really not allowing yourself to find what is possible to be created in the future.
So, in wrapping up here, what ways have you personally changed over the years? I know we've talked a lot about your mindset, but as a leader for your staff, compare yourself against who you were when you first opened after your counterculture training with today in your opening your third location, or third quote unquote location. What's different? What's the biggest difference?
I care about myself more. So putting myself first is something that is completely different than when I first started. I put everyone else ahead of me. So, you have to pay your staff, of course, first. You have to take care of your customers. So every day I would wake up thinking, um, how I can take care of everyone else, how I can make them happy. And that got me to just run myself into the ground. And I realized that, one day I woke up and thought that I can't keep doing this. I'm, unhappy. I'm giving my energy away, but for what? For money, for spaces. It just didn't really make any sense to me. So I went to through a transformation to figure out how to make sure that I am still happy in what I'm doing. And in that, I learned to begin to take care of myself better, to do things to, uh, yeah, just to like we talked about for self care. Yes, that's like a buzzword now, right? But it's truly something that we don't do enough of. So the me then was everyone else first, and the me now is definitely me first.
Mm. So at the same time, like earlier in our conversation, you're not forgetting about your staff or your customers. You're not forgetting about yourself also in a very planful way.
Right, because I mean, if I'm taking care of myself better, I can definitely move into the space and into these interactions and relationships um, you know, outside of myself in a much better way. And that's exciting, so you can't get to a place in your business where you're unhappy. You can be, but then you have to figure out how to be happy in doing the thing that you're doing again, because there's never a destination. Everything that I do, you have to be able to enjoy the process. You have to love, what you do every single day if you want to be successful. If you don't love it and you're unhappy, you got to do something else.
I love that this has been a theme throughout the conversation, and what a conversation it's been. It really makes a lot of sense, because you do need to be happy, especially when your place is called Little Skips. I mean, come on. So,
Yeah.
Linda, this has again been awesome. Thank you so much. How can people stay in touch with you in the progress of Little Skips, and visit your new store? How can we find you online? All that good stuff.
Our Instagram is just at Little Skips. Baby Skips also has their own. It's at Baby Skips BK. And we still have our locations in Bushwick, Baby Skips and Little Skips East. We're opening the fourth location in Prospect Lefferts Gardens this Saturday at 1038 Nostrand, which is really exciting. You can sign up also. We do a newsletter that has all of our events. We're doing a zero waste panel event and fair coming up this April 5th on Sunday. And if you sign up for our newsletter or check out our Instagram, you'll be able to get all the information.
Excellent. Linda, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for talking with us and for
Thank
all
you.
you're doing through Little Skips.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon this week.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode and really are taking to heart the focus that Linda has been able to put into practice for developing self-care. I think the hurdle that has to be overcome for many of us is the idea that is getting over the idea, I think, that caring for yourself is somehow selfish in a bad way. But she can be there more for her people and for her business if she is healthy. I mean, this is something we could all learn from. And as she's developed resilience in herself through overcoming challenges, even that resilience is not enough to replace self-care and taking time to, look after yourself. And so you might be resilient, you might be really tough, but you still need to take time to settle, to process, to care for, what's going on in the inside, your mind and your heart, so that when you get back into the fray, you're healthier than ever and you're able to do more, better, and healthier. So I really am thankful for Linda telling her story and reminding us of that, inspiring us to do those types of things, to make it a priority. Thank you, Linda. We really appreciate you. If you want to learn more about Little Skips, you can go to their website over at littleskips.nyc and follow them on Instagram over at Little Skips. Again, thank you, Linda. And if you want the transcript from this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com. And on the website, there's a contact page. When you're there, just fill your information out, click on Send Me the Newsletter, and you will get the transcripts along with resources and links sent to your inbox for each of our episodes. And that'll have sometimes some bonus resources that will help you in your business and career. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS @keystotheshop.com for all of your questions, comments, and feedback, which I really want to hear. And also, that's the email to use if you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting for you and your business, chris@keystotheshop.com. Well, I thank you so much for joining me and listening to the story of Little Skips in New York. It was really fun to share this story with you. I hope you all continue to stay strong, be inspired, reach out to help others, and freely receive help from others too. We are in this together, and I really appreciate all of you tuning into the show. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.